Alrighty, time for this week's Dollar Dialogue. And this week, with fears of inflation heading towards 5% and beyond in Australia, we wanted to talk about the actual kitchen table realities of rising inflation, because I feel like for the average Australian, when you have these kinds of esoteric economic discussions about inflation, to them, it starts to feel like this intangible, theoretical phenomenon that perhaps only the RBA and the governments should be worried about. But in truth, inflation has a real impact on our household budgets by essentially eroding away the buying power of our dollars. So joining us to help break down this reality and also share some practical tips on how we can offset the impacts of inflation is none other than Australia's number one bill buster and consumer finance expert at Zyft, Joel Gibson. G'day, Joel. Welcome back to the Savings Tip Jar.
G'day, guys. Thank you for having me again.
Thanks for coming on, Joel. And what timing we've got the war in Iran now driving up petrol prices. We've got inflation is remaining stubborn. We're even talking about a potential rate hike next week. So perfect timing to have you on to show Aussie households just how they might save a few dollars here and there. But before we jump into it, do you have a savings tip to share with us?
Oh, look, yeah, I think at the moment the main thing would be it's time to reactivate your money-saving mindset, because I think probably last year a lot of us relaxed a little bit because we'd had some tough years. If we had a mortgage, then last year had a few rate cuts, and it just feels like the pressure valve came off a bit. I know we did. We had a couple of holidays, whereas the year before we were very sort of abstemious about travel. But now it is absolutely time to reactivate that money-saving mindset. And just remember, reactivate every trick in the book, from using the latest digital money-saving tools to, waiting 24 hours before you spend money on something which might not be absolutely necessary. All those little tricks you learned in the last sort of 2 to 3 years, time to bring them back.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess if you're not already in that mindset now, definitely now's the time, because I think, like you're sort of hinting at, it felt like, oh, we did it. We got inflation back under control. It's all done and dusted. And then it started to pick back up again. So maybe we got a bit too complacent there. So, I dare say a lot of Aussies are rapidly starting to switch back into that mindset. But certainly this discussion that we're about to have will help people with that, because, as I sort of discussed, inflation is having a real impact on our budgets, but it is one of those kind of intangible things. You don't really know, what's the actual impact. I know I know it's a bad thing, inflation, but how is it really impacting me right now? My wages are still going up, blah, 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 blah. So, essentially the first question to you, Joel, is what does this actually mean for household budgets? Recent rate hikes, rising inflation, and the end of those energy rebates.
Yeah, we tried to put a number on it recently, and this is before war broke out in Iran. And we estimated that, a typical sort of household of 3 or 4, already the cost of living has gone up by over $2,000 this year compared to last year. So, if you've got a mortgage, the average mortgage went up by around $1,000 because of that February rate hike. And that's the lion's share of it, of course. Possibly another one coming this month or in May, according to a lot of economist predictions. Then you've got health insurance premiums going up on the 1st of April. That'll add $200 plus to a typical sort of mid-range silver policy for a family or couple. And we've lost $300 of energy rebates, every single household in the country, on the 1st of January. So there's another $300. Then you've got grocery inflation, which is running at about, depends who you believe, but about 3%. That's adding hundreds of dollars to the family grocery bill. And now, of course, Iran war overlaid on top of all that is driving up fuel prices. There are some predictions they could get to $3. I'm taking a glass half full view and saying they won't get that high, but it would not be at all surprising to see them over $2.50 in the next few weeks.
Yeah, and that would no doubt have so many roll-on effects to, like, as you mentioned, grocery prices. We've got to get our groceries to the store somehow, and that requires trucks in Australia, and they take fuel. So fuel prices have such a roll-on impact across the whole economy. Now, I know you mentioned in your savings tip, Joel, a few things that households can do to square up their budget a little bit when things start heating up like they're currently starting, or they look like they very well could soon. What are some more practical ways that households can get their thumb on top of their budgets?
Yeah, well, let's talk about petrol, because it's, front of mind for everyone at the moment. If you're not already using those fuel price apps, which are now compulsory, it's now compulsory in every state for fuel retailers to report their prices every 15 minutes or half an hour, so that app developers can tell you in real time who has the cheapest petrol, right? That never used to be the case in every state. It is now, which is fantastic. If you're not already using those, then you might be, paying $40, $50 more for a tank in the coming weeks than you have to. So it takes, under a minute to jump on and see. I use ones called Petrol Spy or Easy Street, spelled EZYST. They're my favorite national ones. They're state-based ones. They're all free. And they'll also show you sometimes the graph of the petrol price cycle, so you can see if it's at the top or the bottom and know whether now is a good time to fill up or whether you should, ideally wait for a few days. That's one example. I think around close to half of motorists are using them, according to the latest data I've seen. That still leaves millions of people who could be saving a packet on their petrol just by using one of these free apps. You mentioned in the intro that I'm a brand ambassador at Zyft, ZYFT, which is it's an Australian startup which checks prices for you online whenever you're buying something. It works with groceries in the supermarket. It works with online retail, fashion, beauty, that sort of stuff, tech. That in a matter of seconds will tell you if you can find a cheaper price online for something you're about to buy. And it's free. These tools are there. They're free. And I think if we're not using them when we're buying groceries or shopping online or buying petrol, then we're missing a trick, really. Google has a similar sort of thing called Google Shopping. They tend to prioritize their advertisers in the results, so you need to be aware of that. But there's any number of different tools out there, free to use, which will help you make sure you're not overpaying when you're spending money, whether it's online or at the petrol station. Or not yet for insurance and those sorts of things. That would be great if we had those tools in the future too. But it's only a matter of time with the pace at which AI is developing in the money saving space.
Now, Joel, the problem with inflation, when it's kind of baked in and people are now just expecting it to remain high, is I feel like everyone then goes, okay, inflation is going to be 3 or 4% or even 5%. I might as well do all that spending that I was planning on doing, further down the track, like now, before prices, go any higher. Maybe that's things like, home renovations. But the problem with so many people all thinking that way is inflation becomes this self-fulfilling prophecy, and it just continues to drive up further and get worse. So how do you change that mindset? I mean, I'm sure that's something that the RBA and governments will be looking to do, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And the only, the RBA, as we know, only has one lever to pull, and that is to raise interest rates on mortgage holders. So it's a minority of the population that takes the majority of that pain. But it has been effective in the past. We've seen in the last couple of years bring inflation down from almost 7% to briefly back in that 2 to 3% band. So it does work, but it's not pretty. And I think we'll see more of that. And I think that's the reality is we're going to see more pain for borrowers in the next little while. They're going to have to take one for the team again. And the RBA is going to have to raise rates probably at least one more time this year, if not more. Just to get back into that sort of 2 to 3% target band. And that will have a genuine impact on the way people spend, because they just won't have the money to spend that they have had, in the past year or so. The discretionary income or the leftover cash after they've paid for their essentials just won't be there.
Absolutely. And on that note, Joel, would you say that there are any, levers that mortgage holders can pull themselves? Is now the time to maybe consider a fixed interest rate? Or where would you suggest that mortgage holders look if they're really worried about maybe another rate hike in the near future?
Yeah, absolutely. The first thing, and this goes for your insurances as well as your mortgage and even your power bills, the first thing to do is just to pick up the phone to your provider and just ask them if they can do you a better deal. And what you'll find particularly with mortgage lenders, is that they're highly likely to play ball if you've bothered to pick up the phone and put them on the spot. Even better if you've done a little bit of research before you make that call and you know what the lowest rates on the market are. Just go to one of the comparison websites. Those sorts of sites often have, ranked the lowest home loan rates available on the market. And you'll be able to name check a couple of those low rates when you're in the conversation with your lender. And they know that if you leave, it's going to cost them on average over $1,000, probably even over $1,500 in advertising and marketing costs to find someone to replace you. And so they've got a budget there, if you like, that they can use to try and keep you a lot of the time. So it's definitely worth doing that. It's worth doing that with your insurance providers as well. Just say, look, What can you do? Can you work with me? And if you can go and get another quote for insurance, or, find out what the cheapest energy plan is, or find out what the cheapest home loan is before you make those calls, you'll have a lot more leverage in that conversation. And leverage is what gets you the best deals on the market.
Yeah, absolutely. It was only about 6 months ago, so I did that for the first time. I was wary of the costs of refinancing. If I did want to switch to a whole other lender, so I wanted to avoid that as much as possible. So I did try just speaking to my current lender, and mentioned that, hey, the rate you're advertising new customers is a lot lower than the rates that I've currently got. Can you sort this out for me, please? I'm a loyal customer. I've been here for 3 or 4 years. And they were good enough to reduce my home loan interest rate by 12 basis points, which actually resulted in significant savings on the monthly mortgage repayment. So it helps. But yeah, like you said, having that actual, some alternative quote to come to with, hey, these guys could do me a rate of this, certainly can help. But yeah, it's quite.
Can I just add to that? A good benchmark at the moment, and we're talking just before the RBA meets in March, I should note here. So at the moment, based on the February rate rise, there are still some rates in the market that are less than 5.5% being advertised by several providers. Unloan, which is a CBA subsidiary, for example. Greater Bank, which is this great little kind of price competitive former building society based in Newcastle in New South Wales. They're just a couple of examples that come to mind. And the Greater Bank example, under 5.5% and up to $3,000 cash back for switching. So 5.5% for me at the moment is the benchmark that most people should be operating off. There are still loans under 5.5. Maybe that'll go up in March or May. We don't know. But that's your number to sort of keep in the back of your head.
Absolutely. Yeah. And a bit of a shameless plug. You can find all of that interest rate information. And we've got a cashback evergreen that we update every month on savings.com.au and yourmortgage.com.au. So great places to start your search if you are worried about your mortgage rate right now, particularly in the prelude to potential rate rises in the very near future. Thanks so much for coming on, Joel. It's been great to pick your brains. And yeah, I'm sure listeners would find those tips really helpful as they start to potentially tighten their belts in this new environment.
Thanks for having me, guys, and good luck to everyone out there this year. Hopefully, what's happening at the moment in Iran is short-lived, and we can get back to just fighting the regular cost of living as it was before the war kicked off, which is going to be tough enough. So there you go.
Fingers crossed. Appreciate your insights, Joel. Thanks very much.
Thank you.